Everybody, welcome. Welcome to my session. Admin or developer like start using the Salesforce CLI now. So please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Christian Menzinger. As you can hear on my accent, I'm from Germany. And so I'm in the Salesforce ecosystem for around about 4.5 years. And I recently changed my developer role from in Salesforce ISV to the customer side. So a new perspective in the developer ecosystem here. I'm co-leading the Salesforce developer group in Munich, and I'm also named as Salesforce MVP. And as you know from every good Salesforce talk, actually, there's a forward-looking statement, so I have my own forward-looking statement. So please do all copy and paste decisions on knowing that I am an accidental command line nerd. So that means I've not been a system administrator in the past, so I've not been, connecting to SSH, to servers, startups, shutdowns, stuff like this. So I get used to use the CLI just with Salesforce TX, and I get a very good things that I can do with the CLI, and that is something I want to share my experience with the CLI. So if I can do it, you also can do it. Also, what's the most important thing is I know that when you have a tech talk, a lot of people doing photos. The only photo you have to do is actually this one, this bit.ly URL, because I shared the slides immediately, so you can directly watch into the slides after the talk or, of course, right now. So you don't have to take photos from all the code snippets, so you can review them after the talk. So my inspiration is that give you some, inspiration, do the heavy lifting, building a bridge. So it's all kind of buzzword bingo. So my idea is that I want to give you some ideas what you can do with a CLI. And if you get the idea, you can review the slides and see the code snippets and can figure out something by yourself. So the most important message, we are all developers. So maybe a quick check on the audience. Who would describe himself more on the administrator side? So please raise your hand. Okay, perfect. And who would describe themselves more on the developer side? Okay, who's already too lazy to raise their hands? Okay, because that is the idea of the talk. Even if it's kind of a little bit nerdy maybe, I want to give inspiration even for an administrator, which can be useful to use the CLI. Okay, first of all, what is Salesforce DX? So maybe the one or the other has already heard about that. So Salesforce DX, when you go on the web page, actually what you can see, there is a lot of things, source-driven development, ScratchOrg, Salesforce CLI, packaging, all the different stuff. But Salesforce DX is in first term, it's a marketing term. It's just a name, it's just an umbrella term for different things actually. So what Salesforce DX is also, it's a collection of ideas, it's a collection of paradigms, and also a collection of best practices. So this is just the umbrella, Salesforce DX, marketing term. And the important thing is it gives you an additional way how you can solve problems in the Salesforce ecosystem. So how we can solve certain challenges. Salesforce DX, even it stands for developer experience, is not for developers only. So all the admins, you're very welcome in this talk. So it's not an all or nothing option. So that means if you or if you dig into DX and you see certain parts, you don't have to adapt everything, but you can pick up those parts which are fit your current workflow and which are fitting into your current scenario. So you can start small and keep going. It's also not solely about ScratchOrg. So maybe you have heard about DX and ScratchOrg. So you can use DX without any ScratchOrgs. You can also use DX without any source control. Of course, it's kind of best practice, and of course, it's encouraging developers using all these tools, but as I said, even on an admin side, there's a lot of things what you can get out of DX. So one of the key message of this talk is actually you should consider the Salesforce DX, the whole umbrella, as one part of your Salesforce tool belt. It's just an additional tool for certain tasks you can accomplish. One of the parts Salesforce DX brings us is the Salesforce CLI. CLI stands for Command Line Interface. So this is the one part I'm focusing on this talk here. And a CLI is actually a basic underlying program which enables you to do commands and accomplish a certain single command. And it's kind of the underlying program for certain other programs. So sometimes Salesforce CLI and Salesforce DX is kind of a synonym. So don't get confused. It's called the Salesforce CLI. So that means it's a CLI to connect with Salesforce. It's not Salesforce DX solely, so kind of a little bit strange here. Why is a CLI cool? commands are mostly faster than clicks, and also commands can easily repeat it and automate it. So if you have done once, you can just repeat it, and automate it every time you need. And this is actually what a command line is looking like. Okay, I see you. So no worries. Maybe you have seen the talk before from Peter Chittum, because Peter Chittum said, if you can write a Salesforce formula, you can use a CLI. And I guess every one of you has done some Salesforce formulas, so you're all here to learn something about the CLI. So first of all, some very basic stuff that you don't get, that you can get the first jump start into the CLI. This is the basic command structure. SalesforceDX, force out, web login, -a, alias. That's just an example, but it's always kind of the same structure whenever you dig into what the CLI can do for you. So SalesforceDX is the program, it's a CLI I'm using. Then you have a subcommand chain, different commands chained within column, and then you have parameters and options and arguments. So this is the basic command structure. So sometimes you see two different notations. The one -a, as you can see here, and the one by using double dashes with a name on it. So it's exactly the same command. So if you start typing by yourself, it's easier to just type -a. But if you write a script, for instance, and someone else wants to see what you're doing, it's maybe better to use the named property that they get an idea about what this command is doing. All right. So what you can do right after the talk, you can utilize the CLI right now, after the talk, as I said. So what you can do is, these are the instructions to really get started. Download the CLI from the web page, open the terminal, do authenticate in Salesforce.org, then see the list with all authenticated orgs and re-log into in Salesforce.org. Who of you has to log in into a Salesforce.org on a daily business? Okay, some people already fall to sleep. I think everyone has to do this. And so this is just a small task. It's not that big task at all, but it's a small starting point for you to get away of that fear using a CLI. Okay, it takes 29 seconds that you can start to use the CLI, as you can see here. You go to the download page, you download it, you install it, you open your terminal, you type SalesforceDX so the installation is correct, you use this command, SalesforceDX force out web login, then you authenticate your org, and then you have an alias in your command tool belt that you can open that org every time you log into Salesforce. And the nice thing about that one is you don't need to re-authenticate anytime. You don't need to reset your password. You don't need an authentication and security token. You don't need a security code. So you do an OAuth authentication to your org once with this command. And whenever I log into Salesforce in the morning, the only thing I do is I use this command, SalesforceDX force org open, with an alias name, for instance, Trailhead, when I want to log into my Trailhead org, and that's it. So I don't go to the browser, say login salesforce.com, and then say, ah, damn, it's a sandbox, I have to go to test salesforce.com. I use the CLI. It's really kind of a quick win for my daily business when I have to handle with different orgs. I just say open and the org name I want to open to. And this is every one of you can do. As I said, maybe you take a little bit longer than 29 seconds, but this is something you really can start to get off the fear when you work with the CLI. In that example, I just used 3 different commands. It's force auth web login, and I use an alias. The alias is just a shorthand for that you can connect it to that org again. Then you have org list that displays all the orgs you have already authenticated, and then you say force org open to open an org. Okay, so this is the jump start. This is the bare minimum what you have to know about how to use the Salesforce command line. So everyone can do. I think this is a good task to accomplish. So, but when you use it now every day, you maybe ask yourself, how can I remember all those commands? And the answer is RTFM. Anyone knows what RTFM means? Okay, so that's what you said, so my voice is clear on the live stream. So here is the formal link to get all the command information. Okay, so but no one is really eager to read a lot of documentation, so I have some tips for you. Efficiency tips. Okay, so that does not mean that you should start drinking when you use Salesforce TX. Maybe it helps a little bit, but I have some tips for you. Help yourself on how you use the CLI by using the CLI. That's actually how the cool kids are doing. And it's actually very cool to do so. So the only thing what you have to remember is whenever you have the parameter part, you can use the H parameter, which stands for help. And so it automatically prints out the help command for this subcommand. And so you can dig into all the subcommands. So you can use SFDX. When you type SFDX minus H, then you see a help, what you can do with SFDX in general. Then you maybe find that there is a force namespace. So you can type SFDX force minus H, and then you find out what you can do in that force namespace. And so you dig in deeper and deeper and deeper, and you get an information, hands-on information, what you may be looking for. Okay, so this is just the example. I'm just digging in, and I always get a short information, and you see there are a lot of force commands. Then you see there's a lot of force doc commands, and at the end of the day, there is a force doc commands list command, which lists you all commands from the Salesforce CLI. And so that's the same as the documentation is. Okay, so much to learn you still have. It's just the beginning. So there are really a lot of commands. Of course, it's a little bit boring to read and get to every command. But I want to highlight a little bit what you can do in general with those commands. So everything about orgs, authorization, users. A lot of things for developer stuff like Apex and Lightning. And also some other tasks you maybe have not thought about. For instance, limits. So you can check the limits of a certain org. You can check, is the sandbox still in the API limits, or is my production near too close to the API limits, for instance. A lot of data management, a lot of record management, also schema. So you can ask for certain things in the CLI. I have some practical examples here to give you an idea how this looks in real life. Okay, next efficiency tip, working with JSON results. So one of the cool things of the CLI is actually whenever you execute one of these commands, you can use the JSON parameter to return everything as a JSON formatted object. So why is that cool? So the first thing is, JSON is a well-known exchange format, and you can also use tools like JQ, which is the command line tool, to process a JSON. So why is that cool? I give you some examples that you get the idea about why this really is very cool. That is cool, yeah. So for instance, you are on a customer side. For maybe you're a consultant, you're on a customer side, and you want to see all the fields you have implemented on the customer side, so all the custom fields, which maybe have a special prefix because you did a prefix on the tool. So list all custom fields on contact, which are prefixed with LDSN call. So this would be the command. And as I said, you have the bit.ly URL. You can review this command in detail later on. But the important thing here is that you can just pipe whatever this command for schema as object described returns. You can pipe it to that JQ. So you say minus JSON, you pipe it to JQ, and then you can filter it down. And this is very powerful because the only result I receive from this command is what you see over here. I only get the two field names. When you want to find out in the setup menu of Salesforce which fields have the prefix, you go to the object manager, you scroll that list, you maybe use Command F to search on the page, then you recognize, oh, it's lazy loading, so you scroll down to the end, then you make it again. If you have done this command once and you have it somewhere written down, it's just copy and paste, and whenever you need to know about certain fields on a certain object, a certain prefix, for instance, you can use this command, and it's repeatable, so you don't have to go to the setup menu again. List alias and expiration date of all active scratchlogs. When you started working with DX, you may be handling already with DX, with scratchlogs, and you know scratchlogs have an expiration date. And so what I do in the morning is actually check which of my scratchlogs are going to expire. So I have a small command, which is this one, force org list. So I'm listing all my orgs. I get this result as JSON, then I pipe it to JQ, and I bring it down to filter it for my scratchlogs, and I want to get the alias name and the expiration date. And the only thing I get back is actually this small information. There's a QA test scratchlog which expired actually 3 days ago. So it's just a short information which helps me on my daily business. For instance, check an org for daily API request limits. So for instance, you have a sandbox and you have a lot of integration tests going on. It could happen that your API request limit is actually done, and so you cannot do anything more. And to really check this on a regular basis, you can use the same command. SFDX force limits API display, and then you pipe it to check here and you filter it down, and then actually you just see that I have used, or actually I have 14,923 API requests still open out of 15,000 in total. So I've not used a lot of API calls. And as I said, this can be done on every org you have authenticated in your Salesforce org, and it's just a small helper. So you don't have to go to setup, company information, I think, limits, and all that stuff. It's just that one command, and I have the information I need. So the next efficiency tip is actually automation. When you get used to that commands, the next really cool step is automation. So for instance, when you do trailheads about Salesforce DX, you want to see that there's always the same workflow. So I want to create a scratch log. When you create a scratch log, you need a scratch log definition file. Then you're asking yourself, do I need to pull some configuration back? So that means, do I do configuration, point and click configuration on my org? Do I need to pull back the metadata? If so, I need an SFDX project. And of course, when you use an SFDX project, it makes sense that you use version control as the best practice from Salesforce DX. And when you use version control, for instance Git, you have maybe a git ignore file. And that's always the same. Whenever I start playing around with some task, I'm always proceed all these steps. I create a new SFDX project, I create a new scratch log, I set the default username, I create a git ignore file, I initialize the git repository, I do my initial commit, and then I'm starting working in the new org. That's always kind of the same schema. And that's actually the perfect time to think about automation. So you can create a script. In this case, it's a small bash script. I don't want to go into the detail that much. The important message is, when you read that, these are just single commands, what you would write in the command line, SFDX force project, and then you make this, and then you make your git init, and then you make your git commit. And when it's always the same order, you can just put it into a file. You save it as, for instance, a bash file. And then you can execute this file. And the only command I have to remember is just calling this script. And the setup is done, everything automatically, or after that scheme. And this actually is a good power. So if you're identifying something you always do in the same order, then you can automate this. And in the future, you only have to call that one script doing all the order for you. This is actually what a CI process is doing, right? So you have a continuous integration, you have certain tasks, one after each other, so you can use the CLI to automate a continuous integration, for instance. You should think about, when you have a script, when a script can run. So a script can run when you call it, obviously. It can run when you start up your machine. So for instance, when you have to log into your production org every day, hey, you just put it into your startup mechanism, and then it automatically logs into Salesforce, for instance. It can done periodically, for instance, on a cron job, once a day, every 2 hours, whatever, and also in a CI process. So you have a lot of possibilities when this scripts, these commands can be executed. So maybe you have some use case in your mind when you really want to use this. Okay, next efficiency tip. You can create a Salesforce CLI plugin. If, for instance, I always have to check the API request limits, and I'm too lazy to process this whole command, I can create an own CLI plugin. So a plugin means an own CLI command, as Salesforce is doing, and you can push everything into it what you want to use. And so it's based on TypeScript, so you have a very rich programming language to do this task, actually. And this is also done automatically. So the Salesforce CLI comes with a plugin generator. So you type in SFDX plugins generate, and then it's just a guided walkthrough, and it scaffolds everything you need to create your own CLI extensions. As I said, this is for sure a little bit advanced, but when you think about the possibilities and you found a proper use case, you can put this together into your own CLI plugin, and then you only have to execute that one command every day or whenever you need it. And so there are a lot of plugins already built by the community. So if you have a certain use case, as my use case, like identify all the fields with a certain prefix, maybe watch out these 3 GitHub repositories. There are a lot of very, very useful commands with totally different use cases underneath. So one is from René Winkelmeier, one is from Wade Wagner, and we have another one from Shane. I forgot the last name. So there are really powerful commands out of there. So even more commands to use, commands built by the community. Okay, next efficiency tip. As I said, we are all developers. Even if you're only if you're on the admin side and you're using only the setup, not using CLI or whatever tool, the setup is just a visual representation about manipulating metadata. Salesforce is a metadata-driven platform. So that means when you put a field in a page layout, what you do actually is that you change the metadata, the underlying metadata. And you can perform the same task by manipulating that XML file. As I said, it's a little bit nerdy about fiddling around with that XML files, but just think about the following. With Salesforce TX, the metadata shape has changed. So it's more readable, it's more human-friendly. I think if you ever have seen that XML file from the old metadata format, from an object, there's a huge XML file putting everything into it. And now when you look at this, it's pretty clear. I have objects, then I have the fund object, and then I have fields, and I have one XML file for every field, and then I have list views, and I have one XML file for every list view. So think about what possibilities you can have. For instance, you added a new field to your object, and you want to update all the list views, and you have 10 list views. You have to go into setup and manipulate every list view and add this and save this. When you do this with a metadata, it's quite easy. You just update all these XML files by copy, search, replace, and you're done within seconds. This is one of the possibilities. Or page assignments, yeah, layout, a new field assigning to a new page layout. Rather than clicking through every page layout you have in your org, you can just do it in the metadata. It's just an XML file. It's just text files. And so if you're used to copy, replace, searching, this can really, really help you to do some stuff. As I said, it's not directly, this has not directly to do with the CLI, but it's also a part of what Salesforce DX is actually bringing to you. As I said, enables more intuitive modifications of your org. The last and ultimate tip I have for you, don't use the Salesforce CLI. At least if you have another tool which already uses it. So there are some tools which work with the CLI out of the box. For instance, the official Salesforce extension for Visual Studio Code. So underneath, they're using the CLI. And also, for instance, Lens built a graphical user interface for Salesforce TX using the scratch hawks, authentication, everything that you can do with the CLI, you have a graphical interface. And the message I want to give to you is actually, this is, for instance, an open source project. You can extend this graphical user interface by execute a command which is valuable for your daily business. And so you don't have to type in the command manually every time, which is really a little bit nerdy. So there are possibilities. Of course, maybe the learning curve is getting the command done, and then you extend like a user interface or build something around. So maybe you can't do this as an admin by yourself, but maybe you have the one or the other guy can build a user interface. So talk to your developers and see what the CLI can do, and there are a lot of useful commands you can really use in your daily business. So this is actually the idea. Start using the CLI today. You can download it, authenticate an org. This is really done very easily. So get familiar and see the possibilities. For instance, you can run anonymous Apex, or you can do SOCL queries with the CLI. Someone in the room did a SOCL query in the developer console, and then you have the result, and you want to copy the result, and you can't copy it. You know what I mean? So when you do it with a CLI, you can export it as JSON, and you have a well-formed format. You can store it on the local disk. You can copy it, everything. You can process the data. So as I said, also bulk uploading CSV files can be done very easily with CLI tasks. Think about automation and extensions. Utilize the existing CLI integrations from the tools, and think about what can be done with metadata. There's also another GitHub repo from Peter Chittim, apply the Salesforce CLI to everyday problems. And this is also something you should check out, because there are also some recipes for admins, what they can achieve. And with that, again, here's the bit.ly link. With that, I want to thank you and want to ask if there are some questions in the audience. you're all overwhelmed by the beauty of the CLI, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we have some time. I think I have to stop, but I'm hanging around, so please come in front, talk with me if you have some further questions. Other than that, I want to thank you and to our London streaming.